maybe that's for each tribe. And then the sheeple, I don't know if it's just the way they share it or that. I think when I was reading some of the stuff,
Yeah, music is.
if you don't have a good shearer
Yes or no,
or you
it's either
don't
way.
tell the shearer
This is
that
called
you're getting
global.
using the
Global
wool
family.
for yarn,
Go
then they
to-
don't
go to
cut it.
Lifetime
Or it's
Salvation.
like maybe they cut
Sarah, you
the
have knowledge,
fibers.
but-
Yeah. Yarn, they don't
Those
cut it.
two global
Like,
families.
it's like, when I see it's like one big.
In your mouth. Yeah.
house.
Get really
Yeah,
creative.
yeah. And there's one post that they have that I have at home, which I haven't missed, so I watched it, but I didn't ignore it. Because it almost has like.
She just came up and stood with me that one time before. I don't know.
But it's thick.
You want to
So
do that
you
one?
can see like maybe they have done that, so like.
Right.
It looks like the
Could,
other
it doesn't
day
really matter.
Did a cut and then
It doesn't
did
really
another
matter.
piece, you know,
If you do it before, then
Where's
the
Zoe?
hand workers.
Yeah.
If not, we can take it back.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Anyway, you're around that for a little.
Good. Don't have anything to worry about right now.
Worry about Zoe.
What's it to the song?
I think we don't marshmallows.
I just want to know if you're right there and I'll go.
Yeah, that is, I mean,
Oh, that's in one of those.
it's in here. It's the African American National.
Oh, right. I'm gonna give it a couple more minutes. I saw some people walking up. Wouldn't necessarily feel like we can only sing that once a year. Good morning. How are you?
Hey,
good morning.
Haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah.
Good to
yeah,
see you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, finally done it all year for a while. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
good.
So where's your next,
Back at Saints. So.
Back at Saints, okay.
So nighttime is over?
Well, it wasn't nighttime. It was just every weekend I would get both Saturday and Sunday. I'd have to work.
Yeah.
So,
Now you can be human again.
yeah.
Well, we missed you.
Yeah.
We missed you. We're glad to
She's
see
a
you.
thrower. Olivia?
Wasn't in a good place.
Sorry. I'm used to it. Hey, how's it
Good
going?
morning. Good to see you. Thank you. That's good.
I like that shirt.
Thanks. Yeah. It was, I made this at the Christian medical group.
Mhm.
So that's what you got for graduating from one of his classes.
Yeah, it's actually anatomically correct. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Good arteries in the heart. We worked on that quite a bit.
That's pretty awesome. I don't know if I ever told you this or not, but actually, when Becky was in medical school, this was years and years ago, before, when we were just friends back almost 20 years ago. I went with the Christian medical group from OU. I was one of two non-medical people on their mission trip. We went to Honduras
Oh,
for a
yeah.
medical mission trip, and they ran clinics in several villages. And basically, my job was mostly to pray with people, which was awesome because down there it was a little more of a charismatic type of thing. But all I do, I'd pray a little bit in Spanish, and then I start praying in English, and everyone start praying together at the same time. And then when I thought, well, we prayed long enough, then I'll just say. I kind of close it up in Spanish, and it totally worked.
Wow.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was really amazing some of the stuff that just that week there, the things that came into the clinic, people with really serious issues that were an easy fix, but they just didn't have medicine there.
Yeah, they still do. Those Honduras trips.
Chrissy, have you ever had a haircut? So that's
Kind of advisor. Someone that leads them.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So when like she gets
So,
back.
then it's way down.
Yeah, it was a really life-changing experience.
That's it. That's really cool. Wow.
That would have been 1996.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Happy Sunday. What a beautiful day. So grateful to be here this morning here at the Mennonite Church, and I just ate a carrot, sorry. Anyways, I hope everyone is well. It's been quite a week with this crazy world does sometimes, you know. It seems like it's never ending what our politicians will do, and even some of our sports owners will do, but it really raises the bar of what that there's a long fight out there still against racism and just injustices, you know. It seems like the farther we go along, there's always a couple people that will take us a step back, but we just got to treat everybody with the utmost respect day in, day out. I'm going to do a little early shout out today. A week from today is what?
Mother's Day.
You're lucky you got grandma filling it. But there's a lot of beautiful, beautiful moms out there. And I know there's a lot of dads in here, but I got to say moms are pretty special. I just know Ralph is always telling me when you're a worship leader, you got a lot of latitude. So I just wanted to do a public shout out for mothers today, even though it's a week away. But I'm very blessed to have my wife Carol to be such a wonderful mom. And I know that she's contributed to a lot of his way of how he is as a human being, and I can't thank her enough for that. But the church also is like a second mom to Stephen. She's nurtured him and brought him along the way, and can't thank that enough. But I know there's a lot of good moms. There's a lot of great moms, and you guys really make the world go round as compared to dads sometimes. Anyways, I told myself I wasn't crying and crying, but I did, so I apologize. But it's got a busy little bit of morning, so we got a couple of really neat things going on today. We got communion. We also got a potluck, so hopefully you guys brought your appetite. We'll get started with a song this morning that Aaron will lead us with today. I've gotten some out, Aaron, so far.
Purple books. We're at 34.
We don't have enough books. We may have some in the car.
We need, Aaron, we need.
Said it's the purple.
It is enough.
You need a book open? You need a book open?
34.
All right, and just a reminder, there are some repeats. So you sing the first 3 lines, you go back and sing the second set of words, and then you sing the last 3 lines, go back there and sing the second set of words there. We're going to do the whole thing 4 times. The first 2 times we'll sing it all together, and then if you want to keep going in the same order, you can sing with Aaron. If you want to try, I'm going to skip to the second part, and you can sing with it. You just sing 3 or 4 times.
I'll sing the one if it wasn't
You are always the Lord, and we never understood. You are always enough. Blessed are you coming here. Blessed are you coming here to your church and on the earth. You are holy. You are holy. You are holy. In the creation. Blessed are you, coming here. Your church, final bread, raised from dead, raised from dead. You are holy, you are whole, you are always evermore, than we ever understand. You are always at hand. Blessed are you coming here. Blessed are you coming here to your church and parting brand. Raised from soul, raised from dead. You are holy, you are holy, you are present, you are holy. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. You are always evermore, than we ever understand. You are always alive. Blessed are you coming here. Blessed are you coming here. To your church, morning prayer. Praise comes for us. You are holy. You are holy. You are never understand. Not our holy. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. You are always evermore, and we ever understand. You are always at hand. Blessed are you coming near. Blessed are you coming here to your church and morning bread. Praise from soul, praise from dead. You are holy. You are holy. You are present. What a praise Lord. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
And then number 65 in the same book.
65 in the same book.
you already know.
Very, very pretty. Thank you. Awesome. So, well, it's time for our offering, and I'm glad that you came up here because I was going to ask her to help me into it. As you guys all know, we have the 3 offerings. One for our church. I'll let this young lady do it. And you want to do one, right? We're going to do one for the MCC, and then we're going to do one for the global family. And we have 3. Go right ahead. Go over this way, guys, and start that. Someone's got this big bucket. Zoe. I haven't seen him give any. That's a girl. That's really cool. What's good? That's okay. You're gonna bless this. Can you hand it up there? It's real heavy. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this blessing. Thank you for the support for our church, for the MCC, and for our global family. Please bless this money to be used in the right way, in a good way. There's so many people that are hurting and so many people without anything. Please share this with them to meet them, to know you better, Lord. In Jesus Christ's name. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Before we dismiss the kids for classroom time, as I mentioned earlier, today's communion, and I know some of our teachers go back there and we want them to be in here while we do communion, and also to let the kids watch to see what we do. So if you guys wanted to bring that up, and do you want to do a song first, or let's do it afterwards? Is that all right? Ralph, do I just put it over here?
Just put it in there, that's fine.
Will you all pray with me? Like Scott said, it's been a strange week where we don't have a lot of clothes covering up some of our more embarrassing issues. The racism that we saw this week, the violence done in our name. It's hard to watch these things. And it's hard to see exactly how our lives connect to them. But we know we're not perfect and we're not better than these people. We know that we need forgiveness too. And so right now, we offer up to God our honesty and our confession for sins. We pray that God will bless the bread and the juice. Amen. The Lord Jesus Christ, on the night he was betrayed, took a loaf of bread, and when he'd given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body that's for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way you took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." As you're ready, you can come up, take a piece of bread, and dip it in the cup.
Thank you, guys. Anybody object if I put the ceiling fan on? People warm. Thank you. Oops. Well, at this time, I'll allow the kids and the teachers to go. Thank you so much for all you guys do in teaching our children. My little ones. Let's just do that. That's the song. Don't want to just do it, or do you have something else you want to do? You got something?
We have 2 songs.
2 more? All right. You guys aren't singing with, right? Zach said he's only going to preach for 2 minutes, so we're going to fill this void over. What page is it?
We in the hymnal number 140.
Is
Oh,
it-
it might be new. I don't know if you guys know this one, so I'll play through it once and then you can sing. In the purple book, number 37. This is also a new one, so we'll sing it through several times, but listen once, I'll sing it for you. It'll take this. Jesus is my God, the songs that confuse us, whoever he chooses to be rejoice. Kind of fast, so ready? Join in whenever you're ready. We'll sing it several times. Jesus is
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for the music. All right, well, I'm going to turn this over to our pastor, Zach. He's going to preach to us this morning, if he doesn't mind coming up. I got a moment to briefly chat with Zach, and he's going to be preaching on John 21 today when he's talking to Peter. And it really hit me hard this week for myself about when someone is talking to you, do we really, really listen to that? I know I'm really guilty of. I'm glad she's not here, but when Carol's talking to me, it seems like I have a million things going on, but I think this world could be such a better place if we just sat and just listened, instead of always wanting to have to say something. Not only can you learn so much from what others say, but you realize that not everybody is the same way as you. That's what makes this world unique, but also what can make it move forward, but also there's people who really, really need to listen to this. And that's what I really got from the messages I read it this week. Jesus talking to Peter. Let's just pray over Zach this morning. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this beautiful morning, and thank you for allowing us to gather here at the Joy Mennonite Church. Please be with Zach as he brings the word to us, and just lets our heart open up to you, dear Lord. In Jesus Christ's name.
Yeah, before we get started, let's read it. Does someone have a Bible with them?
Yeah.
I got it.
It's John 21, 15 to 25.
When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And he said to him, "Tend my sheep." And he said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep."
25.
Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you're old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following him, the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, "Lord, who is it that is going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about this man?" Jesus said to him, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." So the saying spread abroad among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die, but if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? This is the disciple who is bearing witness about these things and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. Now there are also many other things that Jesus did. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written.
So you remember what I'm up to? Last week we talked about Tom. This week I'm talking about Pete. Maggie is the other main character to whom Jesus appears. Yeah, this week is Pete. But he didn't start out as Pete, he started out as Simon. And you just heard Jesus falls back on his old name when he finally talks to him that last time. His name was Simon. Simon tended to go with the flow. He was just a pretty relaxed guy, pretty laid back, or at least that's the first impression he gave. He was a fisher, he fished for a living. Fishing was simple and it made sense. You catch fish, and you eat some fish, and you sell the rest, and then you repeat. It's pretty simple. What bothered Simon about the Romans was the same thing that bothered him about the big shots in Jerusalem. They always demanded this their own special way. They made things complicated. You didn't really need to make things complicated. You just went out and you fished and you ate and you sold the rest. That was life. It didn't need to be hard. He didn't need an empire to help him catch fish. And if they were honest, the Romans didn't need their empire either. No one really needed this empire. The Romans had fish in Rome. They could stay in Rome. And he could stay in Bethsaida. And everything would be simple. That's kind of what he liked about Jesus. Jesus preached common sense. He gave a clever answer sometimes, but his clever answers really weren't clever. The clever remarks were the ones that the people tried to throw at Jesus. People tried to throw Jesus curveballs and trip him up. What was clever about Jesus was the way that he just refused to be clever. He was immune to their twisted logic. He just answered straightforwardly, and it confounded them. Sometimes he could be profound, but Jesus stood out simply because he was a straight shooter, and that's what Simon liked about Jesus. He talked about the kingdom of God, that's how he put it. And Simon liked that image. Simon likes metaphors and analogies. And you can say what you mean, but then you need to tell a story and draw a picture about it. That's how he thought about things. So the kingdom of God was a good one. Kingdoms are usually tangled, inefficient messes. They're ugly and they're chaotic. They go around the world to steal your fish when they had fish back at home. Why did they do that? But Jesus imagined a kingdom over which God ruled. And so finally, it was not mismanaged and corrupt. God's kingdom didn't have any bureaucracy. It related directly to each town and each family and each person. It made room for people to see for themselves what they needed and go out and take it. Things didn't need to be more complicated than that. God provides stuff, you take it, like the man on the ground back in the day. God provided, you picked it up. Doesn't need to be more complicated. That same sort of thing must have made a lot of sense to other people, because there was a really big crowd that first day. The fish hadn't been biting, and so he and the Zebedee boys were kind of taking the day off. They couldn't get anything to bite. They couldn't catch anything in their nets. Maybe there's a problem with the nets, and so they were washing and trying to fix up the nets on the shore side. And then the crowd moves into town. And Jesus was getting backed up, so he was almost on the water's edge, like you're kind of getting nervous that he'd slip in or something. So Simon catches his eye and kind of, twitches his eyebrows up and kind of nods. I got a boat here. And Jesus says, okay. He hops on the boat and he preaches from the lakeside, like from in the middle of the lake, basically. And after the crowd was done, they left. He told the guys to go out and get some fish on the lake, even though the fish hadn't been biting that day. And what happened was they caught so many fish that the boat almost sank. And that was impressive. Simon liked this guy. Simon liked to fish, right? Jesus said follow, and Simon said, yeah, sure. Following Jesus was an adventure. It was more of an adventure than Simon was used to. He liked his quiet life as a fisherman. It was calm. Most days it was just him out on the water with his brother Andrew. He had good friends when he came back to shore, the Zebedee boys, like I mentioned. He had his wife and her family, but that was about it. It was a pretty small group. In kind of a small town. He had good friends and he had good family. But on the road, there was always a crowd. And it was always kind of this nervous energy. There's a buzz all the time with Jesus. Simon was the sort of guy who lived in the present moment. And so the years on the road always kind of blurred together when you look back on them. He couldn't really, he had feelings about what had happened, but he couldn't really tell you what order things had happened in. The past was gone, so sometimes he would forget the details. He lived right now, not in the past. The future wasn't really a reality either to him. Sometimes, he would know how he felt at the moment, but he would sometimes say things that would shock or surprise other people, and he would be shocked and surprised himself that they found it, weird. He had been living in his own thoughts, and he'd said something that he didn't anticipate would shake people up. He had trouble seeing beyond his own little private world. He wasn't really great at anticipating other people's reactions. He wasn't sometimes even good at anticipating his own reactions. He would have things building up inside of him that would just spill out all of a sudden. He didn't know where they came from. So a lot of the time he would keep to himself. He had this calm exterior. And when you had just your own small group and your own small private life, things were manageable. But every once in a while, he would wander into bigger groups, and he would always end up putting his foot in his mouth, saying something that people didn't quite understand. He just wasn't good at guessing what people would think. The worst, though, was when he would encounter people who didn't get it. They didn't get simplicity. They were these people who acted like Romans. They wouldn't just let things be natural. The world kind of had a natural order to it, and when people tried to mess with that, like, it would drive them crazy. They thought like Romans. Simon had a calm attitude most of the time, but when you disturbed that calm, peaceful way of life, the way it was ought to be, when you started messing with that, it drove him crazy, and he got angry. And so this calm guy would all of a sudden burst out angry. He didn't even know where it came from. You could say he was passionate. That's probably the way to put it. He could go from cool to hot to cool again really quickly. His closest friends, like James and John, and probably his brother too, they could see the anger kind of crouching there underneath the surface. But most people just thought he was laid back and relaxed and happy. He really liked the calm, simple life. He liked it so much that any disturbance would make him furious. Sometimes he would bury the fury, sometimes in his jaw, clench his teeth, or sometimes his shoulders would get really tight, and he wouldn't even know it. Sometimes he'd let the fury loose, and he'd yell. That's why it's a surprise when Jesus named him Pete. Pete means rock, as in foundation. So Simon is now Pete, and he is being announced as the starting point, the steady foundation upon which Jesus would start his whole movement. But Pete was anything but steady. He only acted that way. He was passionately loyal, but he was very prone to mood swings. He could flip out and just lose control. Still, it must have been the passion that Jesus had his eye on. If Pete could harness this passion, he might really be the sort of steady foundation Jesus was looking for. He had some good qualities, right? He could focus on the present, and that could be an asset. The movement would need balance. It doesn't need to be too heavy looking in the past, obsessing over the past. And it doesn't need to be compulsively doing things all the time, pushing on to the future. But if you could take a little bit of both, along with the ability to appreciate what's right there in the present moment, then you would have a really good leader. And that's what Pete could be. Pete's problem was that he shrank too completely into the present and into his own little private circle. Pete had a way of focusing on himself, on self-preservation. And that could be a serious character flaw. And if it was left unchecked, it could be a complete disqualification for being a leader. So Pete was a risky choice. The risks were all realized when they came to Jerusalem. Jesus had marched in like a king to the town, but he wasn't like an ordinary king, right? He was like a king who was mocking all the other kings, and even the very idea of royalty. Pete loved that. It was just scraping away all that nonsense and getting back to something that was simple and real. It was no longer just talk either. Like, Jesus had talked a good game before this, but now he was in the capital city. The next day, he kicked out the elites and formally occupied the temple. Like, not only is he taking over the king's spot, now he's taking over the priest's spot. He's getting rid of all these people who were just unnecessary. The next day he argued with their legal experts. They were objecting, like, no, technically you can't do this, and Jesus put them to shame. He out-argued all of them. So not only did he have the people at his back, now he had justice on his side, and the kingdom of God was happening right now. Pete was excited. So Jesus took them back to the upper room, and he was preparing for something big, and Pete could feel it. It was about to happen. The big moment was about to happen. But here is where Jesus started talking about traitors. He totally shifted the mood in the room. Absolutely not. There would be no traitors. Not while Pete was around. That was his job as rock and foundation. He would make sure that things went straight to plan. But the weird thing was Jesus was looking straight at him when he said, "You will all fall away." Not Pete, though. Not me. Even if all the rest fall away, I will not. That was the passion that Jesus wanted. That was the passion that he had admired. But this time, the expression on Jesus' face wasn't admiration. He looked straight at Peter again. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. No way. Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." All the others said the same thing, but Jesus didn't look at him. He kept looking straight at Pete. We all know what happened next. I don't need to remind you. An opposing Roman/Jerusalem coalition force came out to intimidate them, to arrest Jesus. Instead of defeating them, Jesus just surrendered without even fighting. He was worried about his disciples giving up and deserting. But now Jesus simply surrenders? What was that about? No one knew what to do, least of all Pete. He followed behind and he watched from a distance to see what would happen. People kept asking him who he was. "You aren't from around here, are you? Are you with Jesus?" Pete was frightened and he was confused. He felt abandoned by the person he loved the most. He felt lost on a stormy sea like a bad day fishing. It was only as the rooster crowed that he heard himself saying, "I don't even know the man you're talking about." It was kind of, whoa, he didn't even know what he was saying. Jesus had been killed, and Pete felt lost, and he felt terrible. They hid in their room. A couple days later, Maggie, with some of the women left, she said that they should at least give him a proper burial, but Pete didn't notice. He was in his own world again. When they came back, they were saying he was risen, and his passion shot out. He raced to the tomb to see for himself. And this was all good news. Of course it was good news. But Pete kind of stayed in the shadows. He stayed in the background when they saw Jesus, when he first appeared to them. It was only later, weeks later, when they were back at the lake, back in Galilee, Pete was forced to deal with everything that had happened. It was just like the first time, right? They were out on the lake, they were fishing but catching nothing. There was a stranger on the shore who shouted to them. He said, "Try again, try throwing the nets on the other side." And then they caught more than they could even carry. And Pete didn't even make the connection. He was so in his own world, he didn't even notice all the irony. One of the others had to point it out to him. This is exactly how it happened when we first met Jesus. Then he snapped out of it. He jumped into the water and he swam to shore before the boat could get there. They had breakfast. And then Jesus got Pete by himself and asked if he loved him. It's crazy how numb Pete was. Even in the middle of these big experiences, it took him 3 times. He had to be asked 3 times before he actually got a real response out of Pete. It took him 3 times before he finally snapped out of it. Jesus wasn't going to settle for a knee-jerk response. He wasn't going to settle for autopilot. Pete would have to snap out of his private fog and summon back some of his passion, the stuff that Jesus liked about him. When finally he answered with real passion, Jesus said, "Tend my sheep." Jesus' call to Pete to be a leader had not been rescinded. It was now clear that leadership wouldn't come naturally, though. He would have to work at it. Pete's passion would have to be deliberately focused. It couldn't just roam around naturally. No longer was he able to focus his passion on himself and the private things that bothered him. But now Jesus said, "Tend my sheep." The passion had to be directed at others. And then the next thing that happens really brings Pete into the real reality of the situation. The world is broken and messed up. Leading broken people in a broken world will not be easy. It will not be a natural flow. The expectation that everything's going to be simple and pure is unrealistic. He needs to snap out of that one too. The habit he has of getting angry every time things don't go as planned, that has to die. There's no time for it. Jesus says, "I'm being serious. When you were young, you would dress yourself and you'd go wherever you wanted to. But now that you're old, you're going to stretch out your hands and others will dress you and take you to places you don't want to go." Pete objected. He says, "Is that what you're demanding of everyone else?" But that wasn't the point. This was his lesson. He wanted everything to be simple and orderly, but life isn't like that. The lesson Pete needed to learn is that life simply isn't fair. His passion for justice and for things working the way they ought to was good. It's good passion. But it's a mistake to let that passion become an excuse to turn off and retreat and not do anything. Jesus did not object to Pete's passion. His passion was a very good thing. It was the best thing about him. Even his anger was good. But those emotions needed to be corralled and turned to positive use. He needed to be able to learn to suffer and become vulnerable for the sake of other people. I don't know if you remember, Tom kind of reflected Jesus. Tom's situation was kind of like Jesus's. Pete is reflecting the aspect of the Trinity that we call the creator or the provider. At his best, he reaches beyond his calm, peaceful, secluded reality. Instead of maintaining security for himself, he's called to reflect his creator by providing a secure foundation for others. Rather than self-preservation, he's called to reflect the providing God who selflessly attends to the needs of the vulnerable. He's supposed to be a rock, after all. He cannot get lost in the mistaken image of God the Father. You know that one? The bad image of God the Father that's not true? It's the one where God is angry and a judgmental dictator. That's not the kind of leader Pete was called to be. Pete cannot unrealistically demand perfection at all times, like this imaginary God some people worship. Instead, he has to have empathy for everyone. He must embody mercifulness, care, and love. And just like Tom last week, and just like Maggie is going to be next week, we are all Pete. Some of us are more like Pete than others. So, to varying degrees and in our own ways, his call is our call. Awaken, surrender, and learn empathy while caring for others.
Thank you, Zach.